The heat shimmered above the asphalt like a living thing, a mirage breathing across the empty expanse of the suburban parking lot. The late afternoon sun burned mercilessly, turning the cars into gleaming mirrors and the air into liquid fire. Michael Harper's black sedan rolled to a stop between faded white lines, its engine purring in low, expensive contentment. Inside, the hum of the air conditioning was the only sound that dared interrupt his voice. Measured, commanding, sharp as the suits he wore. "Close the deal by Friday," he said into his phone, his tone leaving no space for argument. "No extensions, no excuses. If they hesitate, walk away. They'll crawl back." The man on the other end stammered something about negotiations, but Michael had already ended the call. His time was currency, and he never wasted it. He reached for the door handle, intending only to grab an espresso from the cafe nearby before his next meeting. That was when he saw her. At first, she didn't seem real. Just a shape, a faint blot of pink in the relentless glare. A child sitting cross-legged in the middle of the asphalt where no child should be. Her small frame was hunched forward, her arms wound tightly around her knees. Her hair, thin blonde, tangled from sweat, clung to her flushed cheeks. The sight didn't register as danger or tragedy, only wrong, out of place. Michael narrowed his eyes against the light. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even moving, just rocking slightly back and forth, her lips moving in a whisper too soft to hear. He cracked the door open and stepped out, the blast of heat hitting him like a wall. She came into focus as he approached. A girl no more than 5, barefoot, her soles gray with dirt, her pink t-shirt stained with dust. A small stuffed rabbit rested beside her, one ear half torn, its fabric frayed. She kept repeating the same words over and over, like a broken record. "Daddy said I'm punished, and I have to wait here." Her voice wasn't angry or afraid, it was small, deliberate, as if she were reciting a rule she didn't understand. Michael froze. The sounds of the parking lot, car doors slamming, engines starting, snippets of conversation seemed to fade into nothing. His instinct was to look around. Surely someone else had seen her, but the world kept moving, oblivious. A woman pushing a stroller glanced once and looked away. A man getting into his truck frowned, then pretended not to see. It hit Michael harder than he expected. The sheer indifference of it. He swallowed, his throat dry, and forced logic to take over. Someone must be nearby. She belongs to someone, yet every passing second deepened the silence between them, until it became unbearable. He crouched down slowly, his knees creaking against the heat of the pavement, the tailored fabric of his suit brushing against the ground. "Hey," he said, his voice softer than he'd meant it to be. "Where's your father?" The girl didn't look up right away. Her gaze stayed fixed on the cracks in the asphalt. When she finally spoke, her lips trembled. "He left," she whispered. "He said I have to wait here because I was bad." The words sliced through him, clean, cold, and deeper than he could explain. He blinked, caught off guard by the weight they carried, by the calm certainty in her tone. He wanted to believe she was wrong, that her father had just stepped inside one of the shops, that this was some misunderstanding. But even as he looked around, scanning every direction, he knew the truth. The car that had dropped her off was gone. The space beside her was empty except for the stuffed rabbit, its button eye staring up accusingly at the sky. Michael exhaled, long and shaky, and for the first time in years, his perfectly ordered world tilted. The man who could control markets, silence competitors, and command fear with a single look stood helpless before a barefoot child. He reached into his pocket for his phone, intending to call for help. But his fingers hesitated. She lifted her head then, her eyes clear, blue, and impossibly sad meeting his. "Are you going to tell Daddy I was good?" she asked. He couldn't speak. In that moment, with the sun burning down and the air thick with the smell of melting tar, something inside him cracked. The steel that had held him together for years began to splinter. He knelt there for a long time, watching the tiny rise and fall of her chest, the small hand gripping her rabbit like it was the last thing she owned in the world. When he finally found his voice, it came out rough. "What's your name?" "Ella," she whispered. Then quieter still, as though confessing a secret. "He said he'd come back after I'm good again." Michael looked out over the parking lot one last time, at the cars, the strangers, the careless motion of life moving on, and he knew, without question, that no one was coming. The sirens of the city wailed faintly in the distance, swallowed by the low hum of cars passing beyond the edge of the lot. The sun had begun to sink, bleeding gold and amber light across the concrete, but the heat still pressed down like a punishment. Michael Harper stood perfectly still, phone heavy in his hand, staring at the little girl who had just shattered something deep inside him. Ella, he repeated under his breath, the name almost fragile on his tongue. It didn't belong to the sterile corporate world he ruled. It belonged to lullabies, bedtime whispers, and the kind of warmth he hadn't felt since his own childhood. Before that, too, had been taken from him. He forced his thumb over the phone screen and dialed emergency services. Logic, procedure, his only way to stay grounded. A woman's voice answered, calm and efficient. "Yes, I need to report a child found abandoned," he said evenly. His tone carried the practiced authority of a man who had never needed to beg for anything. "Location? Brentwood Shopping Plaza, Northside. She's about 5. He glanced at Ella again. She was now tracing shapes on the asphalt with one finger, humming softly to herself. The sight of her bare feet made his stomach twist. "Is the child injured?" He hesitated. "No, just alone." The dispatcher promised to send a patrol car. It should have been simple. Wait, hand the situation over, go on with his life. But simplicity had evaporated the moment those blue eyes looked up at him. He slid the phone into his pocket and crouched again, careful not to startle her. "Ella," he said gently, "the police are coming. They'll help you find your father." She looked up at him, blinking through strands of hair. "Will Daddy be mad?" He felt his throat tighten. "No," he lied. "No, he won't be mad." Her eyes searched his face for the truth. There was something unsettling in that gaze, too perceptive, too full of quiet knowing. She had seen too much already. He could tell. Minutes passed. The air grew heavier and the crowd thinner. Shoppers hurried to their cars, casting brief, uncomfortable glances toward them, but no one stopped. The indifference angered him in a way he didn't understand. Maybe because for most of his life he had been one of them, walking past pain with his eyes open but his heart locked shut. A sudden rumble broke his thoughts, the sound of an approaching engine. For an instant, his chest lifted with relief, but when the car turned into the lot, sleek and unfamiliar, slowing just slightly as it passed them before accelerating away again, something inside him prickled. Instinct. That car had been watching. He turned to look back at Ella. She hadn't noticed. She was hugging her rabbit now, whispering to it like a secret friend. "Mommy said Daddy was good before," she murmured. "Before the bottles." The word struck him like a slap. "Bottles?" he asked carefully. She nodded, her face blank with the innocence of truth. "He said the bottles make the bad voices go away." Michael felt the back of his neck tighten. He'd heard those words before from his own father. The smell of whiskey and regret from 30 years ago flashed through his mind, as vivid as the scorch of the sun around them. He turned his head away, fighting off memories that clawed at the edges of his composure. "This isn't your problem, Harper. Walk away." But he didn't move. He couldn't. The minutes dragged on until finally the sound of distant sirens cut through the air. Relief mixed with guilt. He wasn't sure which burned more. A patrol car pulled in, lights flashing lazily. 2 officers stepped out, their movements slow, almost casual. One was young and distracted, the other older, tired, jaded. Michael straightened immediately, the aura of command returning like armor. "She was sitting here alone when I arrived," he said crisply. "Said her father left her." The older officer sighed, writing something down. "We've been getting more of this lately," he muttered. "People can be monsters." Michael clenched his jaw. "She's 5 years old," the man shrugged. "We'll take her to social services. They'll sort it out." Ella looked up suddenly, panic flashing across her face. She clutched the rabbit tighter and shuffled backward. "No," she cried. "Daddy said no police." Michael felt his pulse spike. She looked terrified, not of being taken, but of being punished again. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. "It's okay, sweetheart," the younger one said. "We just want to help." She shook her head violently. "He said if I tell them, he won't come back." Her voice cracked, breaking into a sob that was half scream, half plea, and in that single moment, Michael Harper, the man who never flinched before shareholders, rivals, or failure, felt his composure crumble. "Wait," he said, his tone low but commanding. "Give her a minute." The older officer frowned. "Sir, we have protocol." "I said wait." The sharpness in his voice carried the weight of years of authority. The officer froze. Michael knelt again, ignoring the heat that burned through the fabric of his trousers. "Ella," he whispered, "no one is going to hurt you. I promise." Her sobs slowed. Her small fingers loosened their grip around the rabbit's ear. He reached out his hand, hesitant, uncertain for once in his life, and she took it. Her touch was weightless but grounding, like something sacred. He turned to the officers, his expression unreadable. "I'll go with her," he said, "until her family is found." The older officer opened his mouth to object, then caught the look in Michael's eyes and simply nodded. As the car door opened and Ella was gently lifted inside, she leaned toward him, her small voice barely audible through the hum of the engine. "Mr. Michael," she whispered. "You won't leave too, will you?" He looked at her then, the small trembling child in the oversized backseat of a patrol car, and something in his chest broke completely. "No," he said quietly, the truth falling from his lips before he could stop it. "Not ever." And as the patrol car pulled away into the deepening dusk, Michael Harper stood motionless in the cooling light, unaware that his entire life had just changed, that a barefoot girl with a broken rabbit had unknowingly rewritten the destiny of a man who thought he had nothing left to feel. The hospital lights were too bright. They glared down like judgment, sterile and merciless, stripping away every shadow, every ounce of comfort. The smell of disinfectant filled the air, a scent Michael Harper had always associated with endings. Deals dying, bodies breaking, truths surfacing. He stood at the edge of the examination room, his expensive shoes silent against the polished floor. His tailored suit was still immaculate, but something about it now seemed out of place in this world of white walls and weary eyes. On the hospital bed sat Ella, her bare feet swinging nervously above the floor, clutching her stuffed rabbit as though it were the only thing anchoring her to this strange place. A nurse gently examined her scraped knees and sunburned shoulders, murmuring soothing words that barely reached the child's ears. Ella said nothing. Her eyes darted occasionally toward Michael, wide and uncertain, as though she still didn't know if she was safe. Michael couldn't look away. He'd faced the most ruthless men in boardrooms, survived markets that devoured the unprepared. But the sight of this small, trembling girl undid him in a way that no corporate war ever could. "Mr. Harper," said the doctor, stepping in from the hall, clipboard in hand. She was young, her tone professional but edged with disbelief. "You found her like this?" "Yes," he said quietly. "Alone in a parking lot?" The doctor frowned. "No identification? No family nearby?" He shook his head. "Nothing. Just her and that rabbit." The doctor sighed. "We'll have to call child services." "It's standard procedure." Her words were clinical, detached, an echo of how he used to sound when discussing layoffs, acquisitions, the clean efficiency of human disposability. Now, hearing that same tone applied to the child sitting only a few feet away, he felt physically ill. "Do they always go to foster care?" he asked suddenly, his voice sharper than he intended. The doctor looked up, surprised. "Usually, yes, unless a relative is found." He turned back toward Ella. Her legs had gone still now. She wasn't crying. She just sat there quietly, holding her rabbit against her chest, whispering to it again, softly, rhythmically, like a prayer. He caught the words this time. "Mommy said don't be scared of dark places. That's where angels hide." The phrase struck him like a blow to the chest. "Angels," he whispered under his breath. His jaw tightened. He couldn't remember the last time he believed in anything pure or divine. The world he knew was driven by profit, greed, and survival. And yet, here was this child speaking of angels in a hospital bed, abandoned and barefoot, still capable of hope. He turned abruptly to the doctor. "I'll pay for her care," he said. "Whatever it costs." "That's not necessary." "It is," he interrupted. The tone left no room for argument. The doctor nodded quietly, recognizing the authority in his voice. As she left, Michael moved closer to Ella. The nurse had finished dressing her scrapes, leaving her wrapped in a thin blanket. The room seemed to hum with silence, heavy and fragile. "Are you hungry?" he asked. Ella didn't look up. "Daddy said I don't get to eat when I'm bad." The words hollowed him out. He crouched beside the bed, lowering himself until their eyes met. "You're not bad," he said firmly. "Do you understand me? You didn't do anything wrong." Her lips trembled and she looked at him with such raw confusion that his throat closed. She wanted to believe him, he could see it, but she didn't know how. "I'll get you something to eat," he murmured, standing. When he stepped into the hallway, his composure cracked. He leaned against the wall, his breath shallow. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to do. There was no plan, no strategy, only instinct. He ordered food, stayed near her room, and waited for the police report. Hours passed, the night deepening outside the hospital windows. The moon rose over the city, silver and silent. Somewhere out there, the man who had left that child was still walking free. When the police finally arrived, 2 officers, different from before, brought in a file. One of them, a woman with sharp eyes and a quiet voice, glanced at him before she spoke. "We found an abandoned car about 5 miles from the plaza," she said. "No sign of the father. The registration was to a Daniel Reed." "Daniel Reed," Michael repeated slowly, committing the name to memory. The officer nodded. "We're running a search. He has priors, DUI, domestic assault. Lost his job 2 months ago. The mother passed away recently. Looks like he snapped." Michael's stomach turned. Any idea where he might have gone? None yet, but she hesitated, glancing through the window at Ella. The way she was left, it doesn't look like he planned to come back. Michael's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. He turned away, hands buried in his pockets to hide their shaking. When he looked back into the room, Ella had fallen asleep, curled on her side, her rabbit tucked beneath her chin. She looked impossibly small against the white sheets. Something inside him shifted then, quietly, permanently. He realized with unsettling clarity that if he walked away now, she'd disappear into the system. Another file. Another case number. Another child forgotten by the world. He couldn't let that happen. A nurse passed behind him, whispering to another, unaware he could hear. "That man's the Michael Harper, isn't he? The one on Forbes?" He ignored them. Titles didn't matter here. The money, the empire, the control. None of it could save a child left alone to whisper to angels. He stepped back into the room, standing by her bed. For a long time, he simply watched her sleep. The rhythmic rise and fall of her breathing steadied him somehow, like the sound of an oath he hadn't yet spoken aloud. Finally, he sat down beside her, lowering his head into his hands. The fluorescent lights buzzed above and the night pressed against the window. Somewhere out there, Daniel Reed was still free. But Michael Harper, for the first time in his life, was not. He was bound to this fragile, broken child who had already changed everything, and though he didn't yet know it, the deeper he searched for the man who abandoned her, the more he'd uncover secrets that would destroy everything he thought he knew about himself. Because Ella Reed wasn't just another lost child. She was the key to a past he never realized was his own. Shadows of the father rain drummed steadily against the tall windows of Michael Harper's penthouse, painting ghostly streaks of silver down the glass. The city below glittered through the storm, each light flickering like a heartbeat in the dark. Michael stood there motionless, staring out across the skyline that had once been his empire. A place he'd conquered through precision, ruthlessness, and control. Tonight, none of it mattered. Behind him, a soft whimper broke the silence. Ella stirred on the couch, tangled in a blanket far too large for her small frame. Her rabbit, clean now, its ear stitched clumsily by the housekeeper, rested against her chest. She mumbled something in her sleep, a half-formed word that sounded like mommy, and turned onto her side. Michael's chest tightened. He hadn't planned to bring her here. The hospital had wanted to place her in temporary care. But when the social worker asked where she should be taken until the paperwork cleared, Michael had said one word. With me. It wasn't reasoned. It wasn't logical. It was instinct. He didn't understand why he'd done it, only that walking away had felt like betrayal. The strange part was how right it felt to have her here now. For years, silence had filled his home like another occupant, cold, obedient, and predictable. Tonight the air was different. Alive. He turned away from the window, his mind spinning back to the conversation earlier that evening with Detective Grant, the woman who'd delivered the case file. Daniel Reed, she had said, sliding the manila folder across the table. 36. Former construction worker. Record of domestic assault. Lost custody after the mother's death. Michael had opened the folder carefully, as if the truth inside might burn him. A mugshot stared back, gaunt face, hollow eyes, stubble framing a cracked mouth. The man looked broken but not dangerous. not calculating. Yet something about the photo unsettled him deeply. Any leads? He'd asked. Grant had hesitated. That's the strange part. He's not hiding. No trace of him anywhere. It's like he vanished. Michael had leaned back, frowning. Everyone leaves tracks. Bank withdrawals, cameras, something. Not him. She had paused, then added quietly. You know, it's odd. He didn't take anything from the house. Not money. Not clothes. Not even his phone. It's almost as if he didn't plan to leave, Michael finished for her. Grant nodded grimly. Or didn't plan to be found. Now, hours later, those words replayed in his head. Didn't plan to be found. Michael rubbed his temples and walked over to his desk. The file lay open, papers scattered, police reports, photographs of the small decaying house Daniel had once rented with his wife and daughter. Every picture felt like a piece of a puzzle that refused to fit. He stopped at one photo, a worn nightstand littered with empty bottles. On its surface sat a photograph in a cracked frame, a woman with tired eyes and a soft smile holding Ella in her lap. Michael stared at it for a long time. The woman was young, maybe late 20s. Something about her face made him uneasy. Not her features, but what they stirred in him, something hauntingly familiar. He flipped the photo over. On the back, faded ink spelled out, "For my Daniel. Love always, Sarah." Michael froze. That name, Sarah. He hadn't heard it spoken aloud in years, not since the funeral. His mother's name was Sarah Harper. The thought struck like lightning, absurd yet undeniable. His mind rejected it at first, coincidence. There are thousands of Sarahs. And yet, the way the letters were looped, the gentle tilt of the handwriting, it mirrored the style he remembered from her old birthday cards. The memory hit him like a punch to the chest, his mother's hand guiding his as a child, teaching him to write his name. The same delicate curve of the S. He blinked hard, pushing the thought aside. Don't be ridiculous. It can't be the same. But the unease didn't fade. He sat heavily in his chair and stared at the rain-drenched skyline. The rhythmic tap of the storm against the glass echoed his heartbeat. For the first time since he found Ella, Michael felt something unfamiliar, fear. Not of Daniel Reed, but of what he might uncover. His phone buzzed, pulling him back. A message. Unknown number, you shouldn't have taken her. The words were simple, stark, no punctuation. No name. A cold chill crawled up his spine. He looked toward the couch. Ella was still asleep. Michael's pulse quickened. He typed back. Who is this? No response. Just the quiet hiss of rain. Seconds later, another message appeared. You don't know what she is. His breath caught. The phone slipped from his hand and clattered against the desk. He stared at the glowing screen, his mind racing. What she is. He rose quickly and crossed the room to the security panel near the door. All the locks were sealed, alarms active, cameras green. Still, unease crept into his veins like poison. He turned back toward Ella. The storm outside had grown louder, thunder rolling through the city like a warning. She stirred again, whispering in her sleep. Mommy said he'd find me. Michael's blood ran cold. He crouched beside the couch, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Who, Ella? He whispered, barely daring to ask. Her eyes flickered open, half dreaming, unfocused. The man from the picture, she murmured. Mommy said he's not Daddy anymore. He's someone else now. He froze. What do you mean? But she had already drifted back into sleep. Michael rose slowly, every nerve in his body alert. His reflection stared back at him from the glass window. A man who once believed the world could be bent to his will. Now he was standing in the center of something he couldn't control, holding the fragile trust of a child who might be connected to a truth far older, far darker than either of them understood. As lightning split the sky in two, the city flickered beneath him like a pulse. Alive, watching. And in that brief flash of white light, Michael Harper realized that the storm outside was nothing compared to the one he had just stepped into. Because somewhere out there, Daniel Reed wasn't running. He was waiting. The fragile bond. The morning broke gray and restless. Clouds drifted low over the skyline, their weight pressing down on the city as if the storm from the night before had left a hangover behind. Michael Harper stood in his kitchen, coffee untouched, his phone resting on the marble counter beside him. The same words still glowed across its screen, seared into his mind. You don't know what she is. He had read it at least 20 times since last night, searching for logic, for a traceable number, anything. His security team hadn't been able to trace the message. It came from a masked server and encrypted burner line. Whoever sent it knew how to hide. He rubbed a hand over his jaw, staring into the dark swirl of his untouched coffee. The rational part of his mind, the CEO, the strategist, told him it was nonsense. Some sick prank, maybe. But another part of him, the one that had started listening to things he couldn't explain, whispered otherwise. Behind him came a sound, soft footsteps. He turned. Ella stood in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit, hair tangled from sleep, eyes still puffy. She wore one of his shirts as a makeshift nightgown. The sleeves rolled so high they almost reached her shoulders. "Morning," he said, voice rougher than he intended. She looked at him for a long second, then shuffled into the kitchen and climbed awkwardly onto a stool. "It's raining again," she said quietly. He nodded. "Yeah, it does that sometimes," she frowned. "Mommy said rain means angels are washing the world." Michael froze, the words cutting through him like a blade. There it was again. Her mother. Sarah. That name on the photo still haunted him. He turned toward the fridge, trying to mask his thoughts. "Do you want pancakes?" Her eyes lit faintly. "With syrup? Only if you promise not to tell anyone I know how to cook." Her laugh, a small, fragile thing, filled the empty kitchen like sunlight breaking through clouds. As the pancakes sizzled, Michael caught himself watching her more than the food. The way she hummed softly, tapping the table with her fingers, reminded him of something, someone he couldn't quite place. There was familiarity in her gestures, in her soft determination to stay cheerful despite the heaviness in her gaze. It unsettled him because it felt personal. When she finally looked up from her plate, cheeks sticky with syrup, she asked suddenly, "Mr. Michael, are you sad?" The question caught him off guard. "What makes you think that?" She tilted her head, her blue eyes deep and knowing in a way that made her seem older than 5. "You look like Daddy did before he got quiet." Michael's chest tightened. He opened his mouth, but no words came. He was saved by the ringing of his phone. The caller ID flashed Detective Grant. He stepped away, answering quickly. "Grant?" "Morning, Mr. Harper." Her voice came clipped and weary. "We've got something. I thought you'd want to hear it first. What is it?" "We found Daniel Reed's car again." But this time it wasn't empty. Michael's grip on the phone tightened. "Go on." "There was blood in the trunk," she said. "A lot of it. But no body. Forensics says it's a few days old. The DNA match confirms it. It's his." Michael went still. His gaze drifted toward Ella, who was now stacking blueberries into a tower on her plate, completely unaware of the words that had just shattered the morning calm. "You're saying he's dead?" Grant hesitated. "We don't know that yet, but it doesn't look good." She paused before adding, "There's something else." The car was parked near an abandoned storage facility on the east side. "We found something inside one of the units." Michael's pulse quickened. "What? A box? Old photos, documents, including one with your company's name stamped on it." His stomach dropped. "That's impossible. That's why you need to come down here." When the call ended, Michael just stood there for a long time, the phone still pressed to his ear. The rain beat harder against the windows now, streaking down in restless trails. Ella looked up at him. "Was that the police?" He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, they just need to ask me some questions." She studied him quietly, as if she already knew he wasn't telling her everything. The drive to the east side took nearly 40 minutes. The roads were slick, and the skyline blurred behind sheets of rain. The storage facility loomed in front of him. Rows of rusted metal doors, some dented, some hanging open. All silent except for the soft tapping of water dripping from the roof. Detective Grant stood waiting near one of the units, her coat soaked, a folder tucked beneath her arm. "Thanks for coming," she said, pushing the metal door upward. It groaned, protesting the movement. Michael stepped inside. The space smelled of damp concrete and rust. Dust floated in the air, swirling through the beam of the detective's flashlight. A single wooden crate sat in the middle of the floor. Its lid was half open. He approached it slowly. Inside were stacks of paper, old folders, and photos sealed in plastic. Those came from Daniel Reed's house, Grant said. We're assuming he moved them here before disappearing. Michael picked up the top photo. His heartbeat faltered. It was his mother. Younger, smiling. Her arm around a man he didn't recognize. A child, barely a toddler, sat on her lap. His throat went dry. Where did you get this? It was in the box, Grant said softly. But look closer, he turned the photo over. On the back, in faded ink, were words that made his blood run cold. Sarah Harper, Daniel's sister. He stumbled back, the air leaving his lungs. His mother? And Daniel Reed, brother and sister, that meant... His gaze shot to the photo again. The child in the picture wasn't him. It was a baby girl, a baby with the same light hair, the same eyes as Ella. He staggered backward, gripping the side of the crate as the world tilted. Grant's voice broke through the fog. You all right? Michael didn't answer. His mind spun, every memory, every unanswered question from his childhood crashing together in a storm of realization. Daniel Reed wasn't a stranger. He was family, and Ella. His chest constricted. Ella wasn't just some abandoned child. She was his niece, the child of his mother's lost brother, and whoever sent that message last night. You don't know what she is. Wasn't lying, because if Daniel Reed had vanished after hiding his connection to the Harper family, then whatever had driven him to leave Ella behind wasn't madness, it was fear. And Michael Harper, for the first time in his life, wasn't sure if he'd rescued an innocent little girl or walked straight into the center of a secret that could destroy them both. The return of Shadow's night fell without warning. The city below Michael Harper's penthouse pulsed with distant sirens and the rhythmic glow of red and blue lights that reflected faintly across the glass walls. The air inside was thick with silence, the kind of silence that pressed on the chest, making it hard to breathe. He hadn't moved for nearly an hour. The photograph still lay open on the table before him, his mother, Sarah Harper, smiling beside a young Daniel Reed. The ink on the back burned in his mind. Sarah Harper, Daniel's sister. It changed everything. Michael's thoughts tangled like wires sparking in the dark. His mother had never spoken of a brother, never mentioned the name Reed, but now his world had a new fracture line running straight through it. He turned the photo again, staring at his mother's eyes, kind, gentle, alive. The same blue that looked back at him every time Ella blinked. He had spent his whole life believing he understood who he was. That illusion was gone. Behind him came a faint sound, a soft gasp. He turned. Ella stood there, half hidden behind the hallway wall. Her small fingers clutched the torn ear of her stuffed rabbit. Can't sleep? He asked quietly. She shook her head. The thunder's loud. He gestured for her to come closer, and she padded barefoot across the cold marble floor. She looked so small in the vast echoing space, like a single fragile truth in a room built entirely on lies. Michael knelt down and smoothed a stray lock of hair from her face. You're safe here, he said. She hesitated, then asked in a whisper that almost broke him. Are you my new daddy? He swallowed hard. No, sweetheart, he said softly. I'm your uncle. She blinked, the word rolling through her mind like a stone skipping across still water. Uncle? Yes, he said. Your mommy and I, we were family, her eyes filled. Mommy's with the angels now. He nodded, voice tight. I know. When she crawled into his arms a heartbeat later, something inside him cracked open. She was warm, trembling, alive, and he silently swore that nothing, not the police, not the past, not the shadow of Daniel Reed, would ever touch her again. But even as he made that promise, the storm outside broke harder, lightning splitting the sky, thunder rolling like a warning. The following morning, Michael's security team met him in his private office downstairs. Their expressions were grim. Sir, said Marcus, his head of security, your penthouse cameras picked up motion at 3:27 a.m. Michael's brows knitted. Motion where? The service entrance. Marcus slid a tablet across the table. We reviewed the footage. Someone tried to override the panel. Michael's heartbeat quickened. Show me. The screen flickered to life. The grainy video showed a figure in a dark hooded jacket standing outside the maintenance door. Rain pounded down, blurring the lens, but the person's hands were steady, too steady for a random trespasser. They keyed something into the lock pad. Then, after 15 seconds, looked directly up at the camera. The image froze on the face, half-shadowed, half-lit by the flicker of lightning. A man. Pale, hollow-eyed, and even through the distortion, Michael recognized him, Daniel Reed. The room tilted. "That's impossible," he whispered. Marcus frowned. "You know him." Michael exhaled shakily. "He's dead." But even as he said it, the word dead tasted wrong. The blood in the trunk, the vanished body, the warnings. "You don't know what she is." He straightened suddenly. "Double security. No one in or out without clearance. And move Ella to my private suite." Marcus hesitated. "Sir, if that's him—" "I know what I saw," Michael snapped. "Just do it." When Marcus left, Michael slumped into his chair, his pulse hammering in his throat. He felt the edges of control slipping. The same control he had built his empire on. The one thing that had always defined him. Now a man who should have been buried was walking through his cameras in the middle of a storm. He stared out the window. The city looked calm from this high up, clean, orderly, indifferent. But somewhere below that polished surface, chaos was moving. He pulled open the drawer and took out the old photo again. Daniel's young face stared back at him, full of warmth. Nothing like the cold eyes on the screen. "What happened to you?" Michael murmured. "What did you do?" By afternoon, he couldn't sit still. He left Ella with the housekeeper and drove to the East Side warehouse district where Daniel's car had been found. The police tape was still fluttering in the wind. Detective Grant was there, her hands in her coat pockets, rain dripping from her hat brim. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Michael ignored her and ducked under the tape. "The man from that photo, the one you showed me, he was at my building last night." Grant's eyes narrowed. "You're certain?" "I don't mistake faces," she swore under her breath. "That's not possible. The lab confirmed the blood was his. He bled out, Harper. Then who the hell was standing outside my home?" The detective said nothing for a moment. Then she handed him a file from her pocket. "There's something else you should see." Inside was another photograph. It showed a group of people standing in front of an old clinic, the Harper Institute for Neurological Research. His mother's name etched in gold letters on the plaque behind them. Daniel stood beside her. Grant's voice was low. "We pulled this from the storage unit you saw. Your mother and Daniel were working together, funding experiments in child behavioral studies. The clinic was shut down after a fire 20 years ago. Record sealed." Michael's vision blurred. "What kind of experiments?" Grant hesitated. "That's the part we can't find. Every file related to the Harper Institute has been redacted or destroyed." Michael stepped back, his heart slamming against his ribs. He looked at the photo again. His mother, Daniel, and 3 other people. One of them a man with sharp features and cold eyes. Something about that face made his skin crawl. He flipped the picture over. A name was scrawled in faded ink. Dr. James Calder. Grant looked uneasy. "He went missing after the fire. Rumor says he was running trials on children before the place burned down." Michael's voice dropped to a whisper. "Trials?" Grant nodded grimly. "Brain mapping. Emotional conditioning. They called it Project Eden." The name echoed in his head like thunder. "Eden. Whatever your mother and Daniel were involved in," she continued, "it was bigger than both of them. And now someone's trying to erase what's left of it." That night, when Michael returned home, Ella was asleep again, peaceful, unaware of the chaos swirling around her. He stood by her bedside, watching her chest rise and fall, and he saw it, the faint scar just below her hairline. A perfect pale crescent. He reached out, trembling, brushing her hair aside. The mark wasn't new. It was surgical, precise. The air in the room grew heavy. The faint hum of the building's generators deepened into something oppressive. He remembered Grant's words. Trials, children, Project Eden. He stepped back, his breath shallow. Outside, lightning split the sky, and as thunder rolled across the city, the truth pressed against the walls of his mind like a living thing. Ella Reed wasn't just his niece. She was the last surviving subject of his mother's project, and somewhere out there, watching from the dark, Daniel Reed was coming back for her, not to save her, to finish what they'd started. The shattering truth, the world outside Michael Harper's penthouse was silent again, but it wasn't peace. It was the silence before the collapse. The rain had stopped sometime before dawn, leaving a wet sheen on the glass walls that reflected the ghost of the man standing within them. Michael hadn't slept. He'd spent the night staring at the small scar behind Ella's ear, the one that wasn't supposed to exist. A surgical mark, a reminder of something done to her long before he found her. Every time he closed his eyes, the images returned. His mother's smile in that photograph, Daniel Reed's face on the camera outside his home, and the shadowy name Project Eden echoing through his mind like a curse. He stood at his desk now, papers scattered across it, the old Harper Institute logo stamped in the corner of each one. The files were redacted, but the fragments he could read were enough to paint a picture he didn't want to see. The project had been designed for neural reconditioning of trauma in children. It had started with compassion, but it hadn't stayed that way. A memory surfaced, something his mother once told him when he was 8. Sometimes, to help people forget pain, you have to erase the parts of them that remember it. He hadn't understood then. Now the words chilled him to the bone. Behind him, Ella stirred in her sleep. She was safe and for now, but Michael knew that whatever his mother and Daniel had built under the Harper Institute hadn't died in that fire 20 years ago. Someone had continued it, and now that someone wanted the girl back. The sharp buzz of his phone tore through the silence. Unknown number. He stared at the screen for a moment before answering. "Harper," he said flatly. A distorted voice replied, deep and metallic. "You should have left her." Michael's pulse spiked. "Who is this?" "She doesn't belong to you." "She belongs to the project, Project Eden," Michael demanded. "Who are you?" Her father knew what she was. "That's why he ran. That's why we had to stop him." The line crackled. Michael's grip tightened around the phone. "Where is he?" He asked a pause, then a whisper that made his blood run cold. "Closer than you think." The call ended. Michael stood frozen, the air heavy around him. Then from the hallway came the soft creak of a door. He turned sharply and saw a shadow moving. "Ella?" No answer. He moved quickly through the hall, barefoot, his heart hammering against his ribs. The penthouse felt unfamiliar now, too quiet, too still. He rounded the corner toward the guest room and froze. The window was open. The curtains fluttered like pale ghosts in the wind. Ella's bed was empty. "Ella!" His voice cut through the room, raw and desperate. "Ella!" He sprinted toward the door, but stopped short when he saw it. A wet footprint on the marble floor, small and bare, followed by another. And then next to them, a larger one. His blood went cold. The elevator light flickered red. Someone had triggered it manually from the private service panel. Michael ran. The elevator doors slid shut just as he reached them, sealing his reflection in the mirror-polished steel. "No." He slammed his palm against the glass. "Ella!" The numbers above the door began to descend. He didn't think. He moved. He bolted for the stairwell, taking the flights 3 at a time. Every echo of his footsteps crashed against the walls like gunfire. By the time he reached the lobby, the elevator had already opened, and there, in the rain-slick marble glow of the entrance, stood Daniel Reed. Alive. He looked older now, thinner, his eyes sunken but burning with the manic light of a man who'd seen something no human should. His hand was wrapped around Ella's wrist, not tight but firm enough to keep her still. "Let her go," Michael said, his voice low. "Dangerous." Daniel smiled faintly. "You don't understand, Michael. You were never supposed to." Michael took a step forward. "She's just a child." Daniel shook his head. "No, she's the child." The words cut through the air like a blade. Michael's fists clenched. "What the hell does that mean?" Daniel's eyes glimmered with madness and grief. "Sarah made her," he whispered. "She made all of them." Michael froze. "What are you talking about?" Daniel gestured weakly, his voice trembling. "Your mother's project wasn't about curing trauma. It was about engineering innocence. She thought she could rebuild what humanity had lost. Erase pain, rebuild empathy, perfect compassion." He looked down at Ella, his voice breaking. She was the only one who survived the fire. Michael stared at him, horror washing over him in waves. "You're saying my mother, she created her," Daniel interrupted. "Half from me, half from her data, the rest from science you'll never understand." Michael took another step forward, fury trembling beneath his skin. "You're lying. Daniel's smile faltered. I wish I was. He looked broken, haunted by the ghost of a truth he'd carried too long. I tried to protect her. But they found us. The people who funded Sarah's work. They wanted the last subject back. I ran. I failed. Thunder cracked outside. Ella clung tighter to her rabbit, her small voice trembling. Mr. Michael? The sound of her voice shattered him. He reached out. Come here, Ella. But Daniel stepped back. You can't keep her. They'll never stop looking. Michael's voice hardened. Then let them come. He moved fast, faster than Daniel expected. In 2 strides he was there, grabbing Ella's hand and pulling her behind him. Daniel stumbled back, caught between fear and sorrow. She's not yours to save, Daniel shouted. Michael's glare was ice. Neither was I. But I survived. He pulled Ella toward the service exit just as headlights flashed across the glass doors. A black SUV screeched to a halt outside. Men in dark suits stepped out. No badges, no hesitation, no conscience. Daniel's voice broke through the chaos. Go, take her! Michael turned back once and saw the agony in Daniel's face and understood. For all his madness, Daniel wasn't the monster. He was another casualty. Michael didn't look back again. He scooped Ella into his arms and ran into the rain, the city lights warping around them like shattered glass. Behind him came the echo of gunfire, sharp, deafening, final. The world blurred into streaks of sound and motion, rain, tires, the metallic taste of fear. He ducked into an alley, clutching Ella close as the SUV roared past the intersection. Her tiny fingers clung to his collar. Uncle Michael, she whispered, voice shaking. Is Daddy gone again? Michael swallowed hard. His throat burned, his chest ached, but his voice, and when it came, and was steady. No, sweetheart. He's free now. She looked up at him, eyes reflecting the city lights, and in that instant he saw everything he'd lost, and everything he could still save. The world that had once belonged to him, money, power, control, was gone. Now there was only the promise he'd made. He stood there, drenched in rain, holding the girl who had rewritten the story of his life. Behind them, sirens wailed. Ahead, the horizon was beginning to lighten. Michael Harper exhaled, slow and steady. They'll come for us, he whispered. Ella nodded, her small voice barely audible. Then we'll keep running. He looked down at her, at the child who had been made to embody hope in a world that had forgotten how to feel. And for the first time in his life, he smiled, because the man who had once ruled from glass towers had finally found something worth dying for. The rain eased. The sky turned silver. And somewhere deep beneath the city, the files marked Project Eden flickered back to life. A system rebooting, a countdown beginning. The world thought the experiment was over. It was only just beginning.